Hello, welcome to Neighborhood News. I'm Susan Sedensky, Executive Director of the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center. And today I have with me Jane Simmons, who is the Director of Operations of Stone Acres Farm, and Jen Rothman, who is the Executive Director of the Yellow Farmhouse, which is located at Stone Acres Farm. Welcome.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to be here.
Oh, thanks. So I know that somewhat recently, the Yellow Farmhouse became incorporated as a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, I guess, Jane, if you wanted to tell us what is the mission of the Yellow Farmhouse?
Well, I'm actually going to let Jen talk about the mission of the Yellow Farmhouse.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sure.
Stone Acres' mission really incorporates the education component of the Yellow Farmhouse.
Okay.
What we really focus on at Stone Acres is food, farming, and education.
Okay.
And the Yellow Farmhouse is part of that education. We're thrilled to have the Yellow Farmhouse at Stone Acres Farm. So I can, send it over
Sure.
to Jen to talk about it.
Yeah, we started piloting classes on the farm because it was so obvious when you walk on the property just how much there is to, how many stories there are to tell from
Right.
what's growing there and what's happening on the farm. And we started piloting classes and decided to incorporate the education programs within a nonprofit organization. And the mission is to connect people to each other and to where their food comes from through food and farm-based education. And so that happens with cooking classes for kids, teacher professional development, school programs, really any opportunity for people to work on the farm, harvest, cook, and share a meal together.
Okay, so talking about cooking classes for kids, for example, I know that we were very fortunate at the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center to have you come to us, and you did some classes for kids who are under 10. So
Yes.
if someone was going to send their child, first of all, would the child be alone, or do you do it with parent or grandparent and child, and what kind of recipes would they make?
Sure. So it depends on the age group and the kind of program it is. We do quite a bit of programming, which I think is what we did when we were with you at the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center, the 3 to 5 year olds with their parents or caregivers or grandparents. And that's really an opportunity to have sort of an intergenerational class where children and a grown-up are cooking together and making those connections and learning new skills and being introduced to new foods. And then we do have programming for older children, 6 through 10 or 12 or even through high school, where those are more drop-off classes. But we always ask them to invite somebody to join us at the end and share a meal together. So even if they're dropped off, there's still an opportunity for parents to sort of be involved and see what they've been working on.
Before we started filming, we were all talking about the fact of we all try to eat together as a family. It's harder for everybody today, and we all have different schedules. But why do you think that that's an important component of what you're doing?
Well, especially for me personally, eating together, letting people or helping people understand where their food comes from, I think is really important. We have an amazing farm team at Stone Acres, run by a great farm director, Andy Meek. He works very closely with Jen and all of her programming. A lot of times the kids will go out in the field, harvest with Andy and his farm team, whether it's pulling carrots out of the ground, taking beans or tomatoes off of the vines, going and helping collect eggs from all of our chickens that we have on the farm, and really understanding where your food comes from. So when you go back to the kitchen and cook together and sit together, it really creates this whole story and narrative around food versus just having a plate of food in front of you or going to a grocery store where a lot of it is in big large bins, and there's not a lot of connection between the farm and the plate. So I think that's something that's really important to us. It's really important when we sit down with my son, who's 1.5 years, but is a great eater and loves literally picking things off of the vine and eating them right away. And I think that it's important to share that and start that conversation at a very young age.
Have you been surprised by kids who come out, and even adults who come out, and have never had an opportunity to actually harvest food, as you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yes,
There's such a disconnect, like Jane says, about where your food comes from, and not just for kids, for adults also. And sort of some of the basics of how a plant grows, that you plant a seed, and that you might be eating a root when you eat a carrot, or you're eating a flower when you eat an artichoke, and all of these sort of connections that we forget. And so the opportunity to harvest something and then prepare it and eat it is pretty magical. And I think for kids and adults, it changes the way it tastes, it changes the experience, it creates these lifelong memories that I think really can impact the kind of choices that people make as they go through life and the way that they eat and share meals.
So if we're talking about younger children, what kind of things would they make?
It really is dependent on what's available on the farm. So it starts with a conversation with our farmer, Andy, Stone Acres farmer, and finding out not just what's available, but oftentimes like what he needs us to use, like what he has lots of, like he has too many tomatoes, or because sometimes he'll want us to not use something because it's spoken for, it's already going to be sold at the farm stand. And then we start to think about what would work really well in the kitchen with little hands if we're going to make something with little kids, or might expose them to a new flavor or idea. And so, when watermelons were available this summer, we did a watermelon aqua fresca. We did a drink with watermelon juice and some lime juice and ice. And so that was a really fun way to try that. And we made a salad with watermelon and balsamic vinegar and tomatoes and red onions. It was sort of the savory version of watermelon. It was just a different way to try it. And so the recipes are usually sometimes really simple, but we make kale scones in the winter time. We bake. We really try to do different recipes that give, like I said, give them different opportunities to either chop something or to try something new, or to stir and measure and practice different skills in the kitchen.
And one of the great collaborations between Stone Acres and the Yellow Farmhouse is the recipes. We have a farm stand on site that's open 7 days a week to the public for people to come and purchase our produce and our fruit and other things from local artisans. And the Yellow Farmhouse has a section in the farm stand where they have a little box of recipes. So if someone comes in and says, oh my gosh, what is this squash? And I don't know what to do with a watermelon, they can literally go over and pull a recipe from the box and then know what to do with it. And that's one of the things that we find is the biggest hurdle for selling or growing a lot of our produce, is that people don't know what to do with it. So to really help them,
what to do with it, or they've made a commitment to shop at the farm stand or join the CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture, but it might mean that tomatoes are there for
all
week after week after week once they're in season. And if you've made a commitment to eat seasonally, you also kind of run out of ideas. Like there's only so many tomato salads you can have before you're like, I'm kind of over the tomatoes. And so it's also about giving new ideas for using a vegetable that you've used weeks and weeks in a row.
You mentioned CSA. What is that?
So a CSA is a Community Supported Agricultural Farm Share. And what that program is, it was started many years ago to help small farms. People buy into a farm share membership in the winter months, so usually December through March, when small farms across the United States have a lot of expenses and not a lot of income coming in. So we have a lot of equipment repair at that time. We have to buy all of our seeds at that time, all of our soil amendments, compost, etc. So there's a lot of expenses and not a lot of income because we're not growing a lot of produce during that time period. So you buy into the farm share early in the season, and then when summer comes and we have all this bounty from the farm, you come to the farm once a week, and you can shop in our farm stand, pick up your farm share, and it's a certain amount of allotted credit towards any type of farm produce. So it's really a very, very important part of small farms to have the help from the community, which is why it's called Community Supported Agriculture, because you are, buying into the risk of a small farm and anything that they need to go through during the seasons.
And I think in New England, especially, it's surprising to me that you farm for so long.
Yes.
How long do you farm for?
Well, we actually farm 12 months out of the year. Our outdoor fields usually have produce that are coming out of it anywhere from April through November with all of our squash. And then in the wintertime, we have 3 high tunnels, which are the modern day greenhouse.
Right.
And inside our high tunnels, we have root crops and a lot of greens, so spinaches, mustard greens, mixed greens, etc. And all of those we sell to all of our restaurant partners in the area, and then also any type of retail that we might sell at local retail stores as well.
Which is amazing too, because it gives an opportunity to be able to provide programming all year round as well, especially for like school groups and teachers who are in session at that time. But when you start to eat locally and you start to eat something like spinach, for example, the taste of spinach in the winter time is so different than it is in the summer. So to get through the winter, they convert their starches to sugar, so spinach gets really sweet if you have it after a frost. And so it's one of the things we like to talk about is just how much pleasure comes from eating locally, and even something like spinach can have these dramatic shifts in flavor just because of the time it grows. So the winter spinach at Stone Acres Farm is pretty remarkable.
Really? So now, would students be able to go into the greenhouses like you have them?
Absolutely.
That's what they do during that programming.
We bring them into the greenhouses or out into the field, and they always do a harvest or some sort of a farm tour. And again, it starts with a conversation with Andy about what he needs on the farm. And so last fall, he had a bunch of squash, for example, that were curing in a backfield, and he needed them all crated up. So 20 high school kids did it in about 15 minutes, which may have taken one farmer an hour to do. And so it really is helpful.
Incredibly helpful.
We had a group of teachers who helped us build a barn one year during their professional development. We did a barn raiser. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to really get involved in what's happening at Stone Acres and have that sort of ownership.
Now, you mentioned teachers. What type of curriculum do you have for them?
We work with teachers really across all disciplines and grade levels. However, most of our teachers tend to be high school culinary arts teachers. So we work with a lot of career and technology education teachers, and specifically in the culinary arts, who are working with high school, usually juniors and seniors, and doing cooking classes, but looking to expand their curriculum to start thinking about where their food is coming from, how it's getting to their table, talking to high schoolers who are about to embark on a more independent life where they might be cooking for themselves or buying their own food, and helping them to understand what kind of choices they can make and how it impacts
when you talk about where food comes from. I noticed that you had an event where it was Why Seeds Matter, and that was very interesting to me because I don't know anything about that. Can you explain that to me?
Sure. So the program was with a seed breeding company called Row 7 Seeds, and what they're really looking at is breeding seeds for flavor and diversity. So so many of the seeds for the food that we eat come from a very small number of companies that are breeding for things like shelf life or getting from one part of the world to another part of the world. And not so much for flavor, and certainly not for diversity. Like if you look at a seed catalog, like an organic seed catalog, there's maybe 15 different kinds of carrots that you could be growing, but you go to the grocery store and there's usually one variety. And so that was really a conversation about not just going back to the farmers who are growing our food, but thinking about the farmers who are growing our seeds to grow our food, and the kinds of choices that we can make as consumers to hopefully expand diversity and flavor and breeding that's done in a way that's really good for the environment.
And also probably nutritional value as well,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
when you have certain seeds and you're using seaweed, for example, and organic matter, that's a lot different than maybe from a different farm where you're saying like shelf life is what's important.
And when you breed for flavor, you're breeding for nutrients, because those two things go together. The more flavorful something is, typically the more nutrients it has in it.
So very interestingly, when we started to work together, Jane, with the PNC, you had invited me to come to an event. And I have to say, it was almost life-changing. It was so interesting because, so we had a meal, and at each section of the meal, for example, we first started with a little piece of sushi. And the fisherman who had caught the fish sat down, and he said, well, I was out in Stonington, and I was like, what? You caught this fish today? And then we had corn, and someone, I think it was Davis Family Farm, I grew the corn. And you know, it was amazing. I mean, I really felt honored
Right.
for these people who went out and worked and labored to get that to your table. And it clicked with me what you're trying to do. When people see all that it takes to get food to your table and how we all have to partner together.
Yes, absolutely.
From that one meal, I understood what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, is because I feel like our mission is very similar to the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center, because we want to feed the food insecure at the PNC, and people tend to think that it's just non-perishables that we're giving out. That's what we ask for,
Sure.
but we're giving out good protein and fish
Absolutely.
and produce every day.
right.
And it's amazing to me that you're working with schools and teachers and kids and parents
Yeah.
to teach how to eat well, which is going to help us to keep people healthy as well. And
Right.
before the show, I was asking both of you, well, what do you feed your children? And I didn't tell you this because I have a 5-month-old grandchild now. And so here you are back at the beginning
Sure.
of what do you, she's just starting to eat.
Yeah.
So as parents, what do you think is important as far as what to feed your children?
A diversified menu, I think,
Yeah.
when you're starting out.
Right.
And what as I was saying, we have one son, and he is not picky at this point with what he eats, but we pretty much help him decide what obviously we feed him all of his meals, but figuring out lots of different tastes and textures and eggs in the morning and different proteins at night and lots of different vegetables, and coming over to the farm stand and being able to just eat peppers and tomatoes and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's the biggest thing for us as parents with young kids, is to really
You've
try lots of
exposed
different
them.
stuff,
The exposure is most important. So all research indicates that it's usually at least 3 exposures before a kid is going to feel really comfortable eating it. And so
Yeah.
it's all about exposures. And I always say to parents who take classes, and I remind myself as a parent to do this when one of my kids is not wanting to try something. They'll say something like, "Oh, my kid doesn't eat broccoli."
Yeah,
right.
And I'll always add, "Today." They don't eat broccoli today.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're not going to
Right.
eat broccoli tomorrow.
Right.
So
Right.
I even though I know my youngest might not eat, his greens or his vegetables, I always offer it to it, because
Yeah.
one day he'll say yes.
Palate
But now you've
changes.
just taught
Yeah.
me that if you don't like spinach, that might just be summer spinach.
Right.
not winter, right? 'Cause it's gonna taste different.
Yeah.
And you've got a collard green
variety.
story, I believe.
Yeah.
I do. So
Yeah.
so my youngest, who is my pickiest, and he's really picky, and he does have some food allergies, so I'm going to forgive him some of that. But he typically doesn't eat a lot of vegetables or fruit, really. And he sat down at a cooking class we were doing and announced to all of the kids and parents that this was just going to be gross. We were going to make a collard green salad, and I thought, oh great, that was my kid who said that. But we were having them cut the collard greens into strips so that they could practice using scissors, and it's a fun way to engage children in the kitchen. And then adding just a really simple lime juice and olive oil and salt. And
Okay.
he made his bowl and ate 2 bowls of it and asks for it all the time. And so there's something about exposure, but it's also when a kid has the experience of harvesting it or cooking something, they have such pride in what they've done
that's true.
that they want to try it and they want to
Right.
share it with other people. And then also the fact that all of his peers were eating it, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a second, maybe this is okay to
Right.
try. So there's
Right.
a couple of different factors.
Right. And I also wanted to mention that September 22nd, the PNC will be having a fundraiser at Stone Acres. It's going to be a pig roast, and that goes to our whole theme of seeing where your food comes from.
Right.
So we'll have the pig roast, we'll have burgers and dogs, and all types of vegetable sides, and good food and music. We're actually having Lulu, the pony from Horses Healing Humans,
Oh,
arrive.
great.
So it's
Yeah.
intergenerational,
Yeah.
and I think it would be a great opportunity for people to see what's going on at the farm, as well as to step inside the yellow farmhouse.
Absolutely.
What will be going on during that event?
Well, we'll know more as it gets closer, because I'll have to talk to Farmer Ann to see what's available. But there will be different crafts and activities and opportunities to do some quick activities and tastes in the farmhouse and kind of see what we do there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what other events are coming up at Stone Acres?
Well, we have a wonderful event in October on Columbus Day weekend, so October 13th, which is going to be a fundraiser for the Yellow Farmhouse and the Jacques Pepin Foundation. It's going to be our Fall Harvest Festival, and we'll have lots of activities during the day, and all culminating into a statue reveal of the acclaimed chef Jacques Pepin, who is wonderful and an amazing supporter of both Stone Acres Farm and the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center. So that's going to be our big event this fall. We also do lots of other events at Stone Acres during the year, farm dinners, work with nonprofit organization, private events as well. But we really look at the farm as a space for the community to gather. It's been like that for many hundreds of years. And we're really excited to continue to offer it to the community going forward. So.
And I was fascinated with the history of the farm.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about its beginnings?
So it dates back to 1765.
Wow.
So many years ago. And as I mentioned, it's been a provision farm ever since the 18th century. So it used to be a provision farm for the crew and passengers of the steamship trade that came through Stonington, also the railroad between New York and Boston. And then in the 1900s, it was a dairy farm. So again, for about 50 years, we had dairy cows on the property, and we would deliver milk to everyone in the Stonington area, which was pretty cool as well. So it's always been some type of working farm, and we have in the last couple of years reestablished it as a produce, flower, herb, and fruit farm. So
Yes, and I did want to mention those beautiful flowers. Unbelievable. I mean, come just to see these flowers. They're beautiful. And I think, that's another thing that we want people to get out to nature.
Sure,
and you become
absolutely.
nature deprived.
Yeah.
And especially like we all have that long winter.
Yeah.
And I just went out to your farm. I saw those, there they are in vases. But I mean,
One variety that we
yeah,
have,
that's
yeah.
not even, doesn't do them justice. Because just to look at that garden,
Yeah.
It does something for the soul, I
Sure.
believe. I think just for seeing the flowers, what you're saying when you're harvesting, I was talking to a local farmer just this week actually, and he was saying how he had kids coming out to the farm, and he had a plant, and he said, well, what do you think this is? And they said, a pumpkin? It was a tomato. I mean, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. We've gotten away from realizing where our food comes from, just like you said, and it does so much to be able to open up a farm like that and let the community come and see what it is.
The flowers are they're so beautiful, but they're
They
also
are.
part of the ecosystem of the farm. They really serve a
Beneficial.
purpose
That's
of
true.
being a source of nectar for pollinators, and some might keep other insects away from plants. And so they also, I think when you come to a place like Stone Acres Farm, you feel like you're part of that ecosystem, that you kind of belong there, that you're a player in there. And so there is something really calming about being there, and really kind of sort of seeing how healthy it is as an ecosystem.
So do you work with any other, you mentioned something about working with restaurants and farmers.
Yes.
Is there any type of collaboration that takes place?
Absolutely. So we work with other local farmers to sell their produce in our farm stand.
Okay.
And we also work with other artisans, Mystic Cheese Company, bread companies, North Stonington Ghee. So there's so much amazing small businesses and food artisans within our community that we help promote within our farm stand. And then all of our restaurant partners within the community, we work with many different restaurants from Westerly, Pawcatuck, Mystic over to Groton as well, and have weekly conversations with their kitchen staff to see what they want us to grow, what we're growing, what we have in abundance, what they can possibly use for different dishes, and then we deliver to the restaurants as well. So
I'm kind of interested, when you work with restaurants
Sure.
and you're learning what people are interested in trying now,
Yeah.
have you changed what you're growing at all based on that? Like, do you have any new things?
any new things that we're growing? Well, we are growing something called a ground husk cherry. and they are a sweet little cherry that almost looks like a cherry tomato.
Okay.
And we are working with the bakers of our partner restaurant group over in Mystic Oyster Club and Engine Room to do a lot of different baked goods with some of the ground cherries. So a lot of times we work with our kitchen staff, but it's really sometimes the farmers that are deciding what is going to be on the menu,
It's
and
such
then
an
the
interesting
restaurant
question
group,
that you're
you
asking.
know.
It's those conversations
Yeah.
that happen between farmers and chefs, and that happen between consumers and the farmers at the farm stand are so
Right.
important
Right.
because you start to realize how important it is that of course the consumer needs to be able to say what they want or don't like, but also to start thinking about letting the sort of farmer and the soil determine
Decide
what should
what
be
it
on
is.
the plates. And so
Right.
those
That's true.
conversations where
That's
the chefs
true.
sort of start to hear what is in abundance or what a farmer needs to sell more of, that they can be really creative and get those, they can be that sort of conduit to have that conversation with the diners about.
Or what helps soil health.
Exactly.
Soil health,
Exactly.
for example. You don't want to grow the same tomato over and over again within a field. So you want to mix it up a little bit, and one year that might have tomatoes, we'll have a different type of carrot, and after that, a different green and all that kind of stuff.
So I always ask everyone on the show, what made you get into this, what you're into right now? So I'll start with you, Jen.
Sure.
How did you end up at Stone Acres Farm, do you think?
So my background was originally in museum education, sort of the idea of informal education, and when you are learning about or when you're teaching in a museum setting, you're usually teaching about a particular object and trying to figure out what the connection is between that object and the person you're talking to, so that they care a little bit more about that piece of art. And I think my background, I just loved cooking and have always sort of done that on the side. And when I started working with originally plants at a botanical garden, and then edible plants, and then sort of moving on to a farm, it became really easy to make those connections. Everybody cares about food or has a story or a food memory. And so I think food and farming and plants and cooking together is like the easiest way to connect with somebody else.
You've kind of evolved to your dream job, in a way.
Totally evolved to my dream job. Exactly.
Okay, and Jane, what about
And
you?
I've definitely evolved into my dream job as well. I mean, I started off in television production, working
Wow.
in New York City, doing corporate communications work. I also worked in a nonprofit, ran an art center in Stonington for many years. I grew up at Stone Acres. My grandparents lived there. I grew up visiting with the dairy farmers and in the fields with the cows. And when the opportunity came about to reestablish this working farm and really open it up to the community, there was no way that I could say no to that. And so in many ways, as a team, we are creating this job, this community, this story together, and that's what's really exciting and an honor for me to be a part of that.
Well, I think that both of you are just an example of when you follow your heart, you
It's true.
become happy, and
Sure.
you're doing so much for us. Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you, really. You're doing an
thank you as
amazing
well.
job
My
over
goodness,
there,
yeah.
and I really do appreciate it. And so I'm just going to conclude by telling you a little bit about what's going on at the PNC. Hog Wild is September 22nd at Stone Acres, so if you're intrigued at all about seeing this beautiful piece of property, please come down. Tickets are on sale right now on our website, which is, I think, under my name, but maybe not. Now it's not. Okay, there it is. And also, we're partnering with the Y to go to Camp Watchog next week for the grown-ups. It's usually a kid camp, but this will be Wednesday for only a $3 donation, and we'll have lunch on the porch and a chance for you to look out at a beautiful piece of water. And we're also offering a Korean cooking class in October. So a lot's going on at Stone Acres and at the PNC, and that's the end of our show. Thanks so much, ladies.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
That was great.